All right, guys. Thanks so much for coming all. Welcome. My name's Tom. I'm from Keep Our NHS Public. We've got a good turnout in the room. I hope there'll be some more of you as well. And we've got a large turnout on Zoom as well. And if they are staying away from this chilly night, I don't blame them. But we're very, very grateful for you coming and take a seat. We've got a fantastic lineup of speakers who I'll introduce one by one. But the point of this meeting, I hope, is very, very clear. There has always been migrant scapegoating and racism, which blames all sorts of problems in society for those things without really giving the answers. But it's reached a fever pitch at the moment. It's reached levels which are truly frightening. And I think what we want to do today is just use the NHS as an example, because it's such a good example of why migrants enrich our country and our society and should be celebrated. We need to get these arguments, which we'll be giving you tonight, out into the general public. We need to have these friendly and positive arguments with our friends, with our families, with our colleagues, and so on and so forth. Hopefully here today you'll hear lots of things that are inspiring and worth celebrating, and lots of good facts to take out there with you. It's beholden on all of us to do just that. If we want to save things like the NHS, we are going to need to keep migrants coming, make migrants feel welcome, and make sure the likes of reform get nowhere near office. So that's the point of tonight's meeting. I've got a few bits of housekeeping. The toilets are over there to my right, your left, and that's also, should there be such a thing, where the fire escape is as well. So that's the way you go if need requires. We are also recording this event. It's being watched by a number of people live on Zoom, as I've already said. It is being recorded. We're not likely to record you guys in the room, so don't worry. If you do feel that you're extra nervous about being recorded for any reason, that's fine. Just come and see either myself or Martin at the end of the event. If you're online watching, just make sure you keep your camera off if you're uncomfortable with that as well. So this is for our video that we're making of the event for afterwards. So is that now on? Thank you, Martin. So there's that. We've got closed captions on the Zoom for people. If you want to enable those, our volunteer Zahid is putting in information in the chat for you on Zoom, so you know how to access those closed captions if you want to see them as well. So without further ado, let's crack on and open the first part of this meeting. We're going to have about an hour of speeches. I'm going to be interrupting people if they go over. We'll be waving signs at you all and keeping people to time. And then we're going to have, depending on how much time we've got left, about 20 minutes or so of discussion and comments from you guys as well. You don't have to ask a question. We're going to have a limited amount of time to sum up. But what we really want to hear from you is, how do we challenge these kind of racist arguments? You know, I know lots of people I recognise who are Keep Our NHS public activists. You're out on your street stalls and people are coming, so how can we save the NHS when migrants are swamping services and all these kind of things, which I'm just simply not sure, and we'll get into that. So that's the point. I'm going to stop talking, so I'm going to get us going. First off, we have, I'm going to forget your brilliant introduction, Obi. So Obi Amadi, who is Unite Professional Lead Officer, a nurse, midwife, health visitor, nurse practitioner, and child of a Windrush migrant. So over to you, Obi, first of all.
Okay, good evening, everyone. Sorry, I'm a bit hoarse. Can you hear me okay? Yeah. Okay, brilliant. So, thank you for inviting me. And as was said, I'm the child of a end of Windrush migrant. My mum answered the call, she came. And I say to you, my mother's hands built the NHS, and now our voices have to defend it. I remember as a child, my mum going out to work, tired from long shifts, but caring nevertheless. She cared for your grandparents, your parents, maybe even you, I don't know. And she came because there was the promise of, you know, a healthier, a better Britain and NHS. That promise has been broken, and we need to challenge it. And it's not by the migrants, it's by the people who are supposed to be running our country, making sure that the infrastructure is right. They're not doing that. They failed on that. Migrants who have come to this country, have been coming to this country for many years and for many years to come, should be celebrated because they are the foundation. They've helped to build that infrastructure. They've sustained, they've not just taken jobs as the, you know, the media likes to capture those quotes, but they've actually created the healthcare system that we rely on, even though it's broken, even though it doesn't work the way that it should do. It's not their fault that the government, successive governments, because it's not just the last government, they deliberately underinvested. They underinvested in housing, they underinvested in terms of the healthcare workers that they should have trained to be able to, you know, look after our populations. The migrants that came in answer to the call, they pay their dues, they pay their taxes, they're entitled to schooling, they're entitled to healthcare, they're entitled to, you know, all the things that we have and we just take as normal. Even though the media would let you believe it was something different. They've also enriched our culture. They've brought their culture, their language, their foods, and all of that has made Britain an even more rich and diverse place to live and to grow and to thrive. In terms of the economics, they're a lifeline, they're not a drain. You know, they do jobs which are essential, but often undervalued and not desired by the resident population. They care for vulnerable when other people don't. We are a caring nation. We like the word care. We like to think that we all care, but not that many people actually want to do the care. So again, some of the kind of like misdirection that we have. For over 15 years, as I say, we've had austerity, underfunding, which has led to the waiting lists, the crowded classrooms, the housing crisis. We need to reframe that conversation now. We need to say, not are there too many migrants? We need to say, why have the governments failed to train enough of our own doctors and nurses for decades? Why have they not built the affordable homes? And why is there not any infrastructure needed for the growing population? And we know it's all because of that kind of political underinvestment that is so common, and it seems to be so easy for them to do and get away with. We need to think about the essential worker. When you think about the pandemic, we all clapped. The people we were clapping for, they were migrants. Many of those heroes were migrants. We need to remember not to turn our backs on them now. The person who might save your life might come for you in an ambulance, might be looking for your mother who's got, you know, dementia. You know, that's a migrant, you know, quite often. So how do we kind of like change some of that? We need to make sure that we're sharing stories, real stories. Have a human face to change those statistics and to change that story. That's where you get the empathy, that's where you get the understanding that will help to break down this kind of like misconception that people have. We need to challenge misinformation politely but firmly. So when you're at work, in the coffee room, when you're sitting around having dinner, wherever you may be, just challenge people when they make some of those, you know, those gross assumptions about what migrants do and don't do. Just correct them with the facts. Simple, powerful things about actually migrants contribute to the NHS. Actually, the real issue is the government's failure to build new hospitals, not who works in them. We need to support organisations that hold politicians accountable, like Keep NHS Public. Write to your MP and challenge them and ask them what they're doing. to change the narrative. My final, before I get chucked off, is just to say, my mother's hands helped build this country. They represented hard work, sacrifice, and the love that migrants have that they pour into the UK, because they come because they want to make a difference. Their legacy is not one of burden, but is immense contribution, and we need to honour and protect that. We need to stop blaming nurses, doctors and carers for the cracks in the system, but demand that leaders fix the foundation they've neglected for so long. I say, let's choose gratitude over grievance and facts over fear. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Next up, we've got Samira Ali, and I'm going to ask you to actually come over here. Someone on the Zoom, you'll find where you are over because you're quite close to the camera. But the people on Zoom, it would be better if you stand in the middle. That'd be great. Thanks so much.
All right. Okay. Well, thanks, everyone. It's great to see everyone here tonight, and it's an honour to share the platform with so many other brilliant speakers, campaigners, and activists. I want to start with probably what is on everyone's mind at the moment, and that is that if we didn't think that our government could stoop any lower, just look at Shabana Mahmood's new announcements for the asylum plans that this government wants to take out. I don't have to probably say to people in this room and go through how awful they are, but these are plans that are totally modelled off of total cruelty. They are plans that will only, dehumanise actually refugees and migrants in this country even more at a moment which is so dangerous already with the rise of racism and the far right. I think there are asylum plans that won't just affect refugees coming into this country and those people that take the very hard decision to come here and flee war and persecution and abuse, and the people that should always be met with compassion, but also will attack people who already are, refugees that already live in this country, their right to bring their families to this country, and also migrants in this country who are faced with, the stripping and their cancellation of their visas, their rights to work here, their right to actually be the people that are constantly propping up the NHS that is crumbling before our very eyes. And I think that all of the plans are being summed up really by some of the worst of it, which is the announcement that refugees coming into this country may have their jewellery, their wedding rings, whatever they can bring off their backs, taken off them at the border as a way for them to try and pay their way into this country. And I think people are right to draw the very, very chilling comparisons to some of the worst horrors of racism on the far right that we've seen throughout history with that announcement. And these announcements come at a time when refugees and migrants are being targeted like we haven't seen in decades. Sanctuary racism has been doing a lot to respond to around the country where the far right are turning up outside of refugees in their accommodation, attempting to intimidate protests and at the worst of it, break in there, burn the accommodation down and so on. It's a time when the far right are marching on our streets in numbers like never before, when Tommy Robinson can get over 100,000 people out in central London on a demonstration that is led by a fascist like himself. And the far right are not just marching to stop the boats, something that is apparently Labour government policy now, but also marching for remigration. The cause of fascist governments throughout Europe and so on. And it's a time when racist attacks are on the rise. And when, people, in the RCN, for example, the nursing union are talking about record amounts of racist, incidents for nurses and those working in the NHS who are migrants or belong to ethnic minorities and so on. And I think the announcement comes at a time when we are all looking at the rise of Reform UK, but Labour are drawing the conclusion that they are trying to copy the rhetoric of reform to try and stem the tide of them. And I think you can see, if you look at who is celebrating Labour's new announcements, it is the people in Reform UK who say that she's trying to apply for a job on our side now, and it's even people like Tommy Robinson himself who's saying that the Overton window is shifting in his direction, and it does look like that if you look at the actions of a lot of the political establishment. I think it's clear to us that these announcements, the racist scapegoating, the sliding to the right is not going to stop the growth of reform. All it is going to do is normalise their politics, normalise the policies they want to carry through, normalise their rhetoric, and it's only going to fuel their growth at this time. Because I think we have to have a very clear message for Starmer, for Shabana Mahmood, that you do not stop the far right by copying their rhetoric or their policies. You only stop the far right by standing up to it, calling them out and opposing their racism every step of the way. Okay, so I've got to end, and I know I don't want to eat into anyone else's time, but I'll just end on this because I think that we need to see more action for the NHS. I think we need to see more action to improve people's lives in this country, their living, their conditions, and so on. We need to see more action, like the junior doctors taking a stand and going on strike, like those mental health workers in Newham right now, and we give all our solidarity to them and to all migrants in the NHS right now who are faced with the cancellation of their rights to work here. And we need to expose the fact that people like Reform UK will do nothing to save the NHS or make ordinary lives people any better. It will only make more misery in this country. And we have to do all that, and we also have to call out the racism when we see it. We have to call out the racism of Labour, the Labour government, and we have to call out when Starmer says that this is an island of strangers. We know that this isn't an island of strangers. Anyone that interacts with the NHS, public services and so on knows that this is an island that is built on migration, always has been, and that is the strength of our society today. But we're in very dangerous times. And we are very proud of the work that anti-racists do up and down the country at a moment like this, but I know we need a lot more. We need a bigger anti-racist movement that can stop the racist policies, can stop the direction of this Labour government as they slide further and further to the right, will oppose the far right wherever they come out, and will be the force that can stop Reform UK getting into the next elections. Thanks.
Thank you, Sarah. That's good. So that being harsh on timing, there's a lot of speakers I really want you all to hear from. Plus, I have just got a message of support from Diane Abbott, MP, just a very short message. She says racism is running rampant in the NHS, virtually unopposed by most leading politicians. It is part of the wider climate in society that is now being fostered, but it is completely unacceptable, and it is time to make a stand. We need to say very loudly and clearly, we rely on the hard work of everyone in the NHS, and we will not tolerate racism against anyone. So that's a message from Labour MP Diana. All right. So next to me we have an A&E doctor who is himself a migrant and a fantastic friend to keep our NHS public and a great activist, Andrew.
Thank you so much. Thank you to Keep Our NHS Public and to all of the speakers for joining us today. It's wonderful to hear everybody's contribution. And as a migrant worker in this country, I'm grateful for your support. And that's all of us, whether I come from Baltimore or Bangalore or wherever in the world that we come to your country from. We are here to help. We're here to, especially in the NHS, the 80 departments that I have all worked in. Sorry, the 80 departments that I've all worked in have been absolutely run by immigrants caring for local population, because we care about the health and welfare of your country. But I wanted to speak about some other things. Again, well, I'm Andrew. I am a proud NHS A&E doctor here in London, and I'm also a proud immigrant to your country. I am grateful to be here in this country, and after 10 years in London, I'd like to call this country my own as well. And we just got our indefinite leave to remain, so grateful for that, grateful to be here in your country. It is heartbreaking that we have to be here today discussing this topic, but it is very much an important one. And as an immigrant and as an NHS worker, as a doctor fighting to improve your healthcare, I wanted to share some thoughts. There is a great anger in this country, a great rage in this nation, and it is understandable. If you put yourselves in the shoes of somebody who grew up in Clacton, in Blackpool, Middlesbrough, Hartlepool, and so many of the other deprived areas of this country, those people rightfully feel like they've been left behind. Modern life in Britain, to them and to so many of us, feels like a scam. And that's because it is. Many people have been living here for generations, many indigenous people living here, living in areas with the highest levels of deprivation, the worst health outcomes, where community services have been ripped from their streets, and their present and their future has been stolen from them, sacrificed at the altar of austerity 1.0 and 2.0. And they have every right to be furious and every right to be angry, to be enraged. This is a country that I've noticed believes in fairness. You guys love to queue. And I think for many people, it feels like they've been waiting for the time that their family has a piece of the pie that they so richly deserve. And yet the government just gives them crumbs. To everyone living in a deprived community, whether you have been here for 1,000 years or you've been here for 1,000 days, I feel your pain, I really do, and I see your pain every single day in my patients in A&E. And your pain is absolutely, and your experience is absolutely, is all too real, and your anger is absolutely justified. But I need to be clear about who did this to you, to these people, and how we can fix it together. It wasn't us migrants who closed over 100 local A&E departments. It wasn't us that closed over 200 museums. We didn't close 244 courts, 279 school playing fields, 451 homeless services. We immigrants didn't close 600 police stations or the 750 youth centers. We didn't sell off 793 playgrounds. We didn't shutter 800 libraries. And we didn't bulldoze 926 football pitches. We immigrants didn't close over 1,000 points of primary care in this country, preventing you from seeing a GP or a pharmacist. We didn't drain the water from over 1,000 swimming pools, and we certainly didn't lock the doors of over 1,400 Sure Start centers, helping you and your children. We also didn't cancel 8,000 bus routes. We didn't drive 20,000 doctors away from the country every year, and we didn't force 40,000 nurses to leave either. We immigrants didn't take away 25,000 hospital beds from your NHS hospitals. And we immigrants certainly did not cause the premature deaths of over 1 million working class people from poverty, austerity, and COVID. That was not immigrants. That was your own government. We immigrants didn't defund your society, your communities, your NHS, cutting investment by 500 billion pounds and treat your life as expendable, sacrificing a generation of your community at the altar of budget cuts. We didn't do that. That was the Conservative Party, but successive governments, and Labour is now responsible as well. They took everything from all of us. They removed the societal bonds forged in all of these public spaces. They defunded and sold off this country. And so it's no surprise that all of us feel so disconnected, so detached, so lonely, and so isolated. The Conservatives took away everything that bound us together, and Labour still has no clue how bad it is for all of us. And both major parties now expect us to just fight over the scraps of what they've left behind. But we have to draw the line somewhere, and it has to be now, because they've taken everything from us, all of our public spaces, everything that binds us together, and now they want us to take away our decency too. This is a great country. It's not just in the name, but it is a great country. We just got our indefinite leave to remain, and we had to do the life in the UK test. And in that test, they talk about the values that you guys have here, decency, tolerance, and governments are eroding that. They want us to fight over the scraps of what's left. And the answer is compassion. The answer is that we need to rebuild this country together, but also give love to our neighbors in Clacton and Blackpool, and have more place in our hearts for each other. But we also need to have more love in our hearts for our new British neighbors fleeing war and extreme poverty, because they're suffering too. We have an awful lot in common. The only way that we are going to fix this country is if we stop fighting each other and we start rebuilding. And the only way that we're going to do that is a wealth tax on the super rich. Yeah. It's about reforming our tax system so we tax wealth and not work. It's reforming this country together so that we can all have a thriving public space where all of our children, no matter what our level of income is, can have a better future and a better life. Okay? This is a great country, and the fight to restore that must start now with some amazing people in the room. Thank you to you guys, everybody on this panel. Thank you, Zack and Zarah. I think you guys are the future and the hope that we desperately need right now. And to everybody that's suffering at home, we need to work together, immigrants and indigenous, however long you've been in this country, we need to work together and build together, because we have a lot more in common than all of the divisions that the government is trying to. Oh, yeah.
Thank you, brother. That's great. Okay, thanks so much, Andrew Meyerson. Next up, we've got Sybil Msezane, and you are a care worker from Pan African Workers Association. We're great. We're very welcome.
Hi everyone, my name is Sybil Msezane. I'm from South Africa, and I came to the UK about 3 years ago on sponsorship from a local authority to work in a children's residential home run by a local authority. 3 years later, I am struggling to get a new certificate of sponsorship because the local authority I used to work for has not renewed my certificate of sponsorship. And this is the reality of many migrant workers like myself, when, like in the Windrush generation in 2021, there was a call yet again asking people to come to the UK to work in the health and social care sector. But for every worker who came, your stay in the UK was dependent on your employer renewing your certificate of sponsorship. Over the last 3-4 years, but particularly over, I'd say, about the last 2 years, more and more has been coming out on how these certificates of sponsorship have been used to fuel modern slavery. When I started my working career, I worked on child labor issues. And I remember back in the 90s when we were at the ILO talking about issues of child slavery and how Western countries, the United Kingdom included, were almost like, chastising countries in the global South. So when I arrived here in 2022, it was quite shocking to me that in the UK, workers don't have day one rights. And then also with things like the certificate of sponsorship, you're tied to an employer, which to me is quite similar to indentured servitude. And this is in 2022, and it continues in 2025. I want to talk a little bit about a group of 300 nursing assistants in Manchester at Manchester University NHS Foundation Trust, who are currently facing losing their jobs and deportation because of the changes that were made in July this year in regard to the salary threshold. This was not something that they made up, because when they started working for the trust, they were told they needed to work for 6 months, pass a number of exams, and then they would be made into band 3 and be eligible for sponsorship. In July, changes came, and now their new salary is £24,937, a £63 shortfall, or £120 per week, means that 300 nursing assistants with their families face deportation after they have done everything, which is what usually happens. It seems we're constantly having to jump hoops in this country as migrant workers. When we come here, to help, to work. We pay our taxes. We don't claim any public funds because Shababa Mahmood keeps on trying to allude that migrant workers, because we have to volunteer now. I'm not sure when in the day I'm going to find time to volunteer after working long days, which are usually anything between 12 and 16 hours a day. And you often have to take overtime or just all of that. Then you're also supposed to show that you've integrated and you're doing over and above the ordinary citizen in the UK. And this is a country which talks about fairness. What is fair in that? What is fair in making 300 nursing assistants working in an NHS trust to do all the work that is needed and then turn your backs because the trust says there's nothing that they can do? I mean, I don't think it's impossible to, if they had to meet the threshold or, but one of the things I will say that we're hoping is going to happen on the 17th of December, at Westminster, there's a Migrant Workers' Day where we are going to be, because not only do we need to do more, we might need to stay in servitude a little longer, 5 more years before you can get indefinite leave to remain instead of just the 5, which was what was on the table when I signed my contract in 2022 and what many people signed up to when the call was made for health and social care workers. So I hope people in the same way they've worked with Save Our NHS will continue to come and work alongside and show up for migrant workers on the 17th of December at Westminster, where we will be talking with government about how ILR should remain at 5 years and not 10 years. Most of us, I think it's really, really important for people to remember that we're not cattle or, we're people with families, with responsibilities. I moved here with my child who was 16 at the time. Fortunately, because he's British, I'm not, he may be able to stay, but I may not if I don't find work. These are all the complicated stories that all of us as migrants come to this country with. And it's really, really important to have us come together to not only save the NHS, but to really see migrant workers who contribute to the NHS and the health and social care system as people. Thank you.
Thank you, Sybil. And of course, what's I hope is important and useful about this meeting that is focusing on not just the NHS, but as we've heard, health and care workers more generally. This is true for all public services, and it's also true, of course, right across the entirety of society. That's also why I think it's really great. We've got somebody from the National Education Union who can talk about the difficulties their members are facing and why this issue is so important for us all. So Ed Harlow, thank you, Vice President of the NEU.
Hi, my name is Ed. I'm a music teacher in London. I've been teaching about 20 years, and I'm no longer vice president. I've just been vice president. And we've got a problem across the entirety of society and the entirety of the public sector, and it's been going on a long time. We are living with a political culture of kind of competitive cruelty. Since we have a government that are just moving further and further into really quite dark territory. And I mean, let's be absolutely right. this narrative that the NHS is overrun by migrants, it's run by migrants. It's not overrun, it's run by them. And if we went down the road that Nigel Farage and his mates want to go down, the whole thing would collapse overnight, and that's what they want. So the idea that somehow we're protecting the NHS by going down this road is just absolute nonsense. It's completely the opposite. And of course, we've talked a lot about, you know, the sympathy for a society that has been just smashed again and again and again. Austerity 1 and 2.0, and exactly the same thing happened in education. I've been teaching 20 years. I started teaching in about 2005. Came into a system that was pretty functional, pretty good. There was money to the children were at the heart of everything that we did. We were able to make educational decisions based on what was right for children. And then in 2010, of course, came Michael Gove and came austerity and the squeezing of the funding, the squeezing of the curriculum, and really a class war against working class children. And of course, society has been smashed over that period, and the cracks are beginning to show in society. And when you have cracks in society, in those cracks, the weeds of fascism and racism grow. And that's of course what we've had. And we worked out with Samira against Tommy Robinson's Unite the Kingdom March. And let's have a look at that Unite the Kingdom March, because not everybody at that march was a racist, but they were listening to some pretty horrific racism, and they were impressed by Elon Musk. Now, Elon Musk, if we really want to have a think about where we've gone wrong in society and where the money has gone for the NHS and where the money has gone for education, this is a guy who, on most days, his net worth is roughly twice the NHS's annual budget. He has just signed a deal with Tesla where they are proposing to pay him, if he hits various targets, $1 trillion. So $1 trillion is roughly 4 times the entire public sector pay bill for this country. It is an absurd amount of money, an absolutely absurd amount of money. So the idea, the concept of there not being any money is just nonsense. And we live in the age of the kind of 3-word political slogan, you know, we've had get Brexit done and stop votes. I hope that I one day see the day where somebody is standing at the left hand outside Downing Street, maybe 1 year, and it says tax the rich. So we absolutely need to, and as I say, I'm a teacher, but most of my family are actually medics. My mum was a Great Ormond Street nurse, and later a children and family social worker. My sister's a paediatric intensive care consultant in Nottingham, and my partner was too. But education is exactly the same that we've heard. Education schools are run on, you know, they are run on the basis of what our society looks like, and we are a migrant society. We always have been. The idea that people can just up and leave is just absurd. This is their home. And of course, we have children here. But let's have a look at what's happening with our population. We've got a rapidly aging population. We've got school population projected to decline by around 10% over the next 10 years. And let's have a look at why that is. Is that because we're being overrun by migrants? Of course not. We've got a declining population of young people. We've got a rapidly aging population. We need migrants in this country. We need migrant labour in this country to maintain society. Otherwise, things collapse. If you look at schools, about 70 schools have closed in London over the last few years. School place numbers in London are absolutely in massive decline. They're actually rising in some parts of the country. In London, they're declining. It's about 500,000 projected to 500,000 fewer pupils to be projected in our schools in the next few years. And that's a major problem, because we've got a rapidly aging population where actually the number of over 65s is projected to go up by 50% quite rapidly. And so the idea that we just attack people arriving on small bus is just absurd. That, you know, we have genuine enemies of the working class in this country that don't arrive in rubber dinghies. They arrive by private jet, and they arrive by super yacht. We need to go after them. But from the NEU and from the education sector as a whole, absolute solidarity with everything that's going on in the NHS. Everything that I've read about in this, the privatisations, all happening in education as well. There is a concerted effort to smash everything that belongs to us, that belongs to the people. There's a concerted effort to smash the welfare state, to smash health, to smash education, and it needs concerted resistance from all of us, and it needs resistance against the racist rhetoric which is used to prop it up.
Thank you so much. Just one there. Here we go. Adekunle Akinola is a mental health nurse and co-chair of Unison Overseas Nurses Network.
Well, thank you. My name is Adekunle Akinola, and I'm just here to share my story as a migrant worker. I stand before you not just as a migrant worker, but someone who has dedicated my life to caring for patients in the NHS, and not from the comfortable seat in Parliament or in the offices of a political party. Every day, every shift, every procedure I do, I see the struggles of the NHS. I see migrant workers like me keeping it alive. Like many of my migrant colleagues, I came into this country to work in the NHS. We answered the call when the NHS was on its knees during the COVID pandemic. I came because I care, because I believe in compassion and in the principle that healthcare should be a right and not a privilege. We left families and loved ones behind. We risked our lives when the world was in lockdown. I remember the pride I felt when the whole of the UK opened their windows every Sunday to clap for the heroes of the front line. But unfortunately today, as far as Mahmoud is concerned, we are just boys with. Yes, the NHS is in crisis. Waiting lists are at record highs and still soaring. EDs are overwhelmed. Staff are exhausted and leaving because they can no longer cope. Yeah, these are real problems, but let's be clear. They are not caused by migrants. They are the result of chronic underfunding, an aging population, and years of political decisions that have weakened the health system. As migrant workers, we've contributed in so many ways. Nearly 1 in NHS staff are non-British nationals, and that's around about 265,000 people from over 200 countries. More than 2/3 of doctors and almost half of nurses joining the NHS registers in recent years are trained outside of the UK. The NHS currently has over 100,000 vacancies, including tens of thousands of nurses. Migrant workers are stepping into these roles to fill the gaps. We contribute billions in taxes, national insurance, and in addition to this, we are required to pay thousands in immigration health surcharge, often while using fewer health services than the average citizen, if any at all. As migrants, we fund the NHS more than we are using from it. We also bring diverse skills, languages, and cultural understanding that make patients more humane, that make patient care more humane and inclusive. And the truth is, when you walk into an hospital, you are far more likely to be cared for by a migrant worker than to find one sitting next to you in the waiting room. We are not a burden. We are the backbone of the NHS. Without migrant workers, the NHS would collapse. And without our taxpayers, the treasury would be poorer. Overseas staff have played a more vital role in the NHS from its early years in the 1950s right through to the present day. And frankly, the very concept of an NHS wouldn't have been possible without the migrant workers who helped build it at inception, and would have certainly collapsed without their continued support at the front lines. And yet, after all this, we are now being scapegoated by the same politicians who once called us heroes. We are being met with vicious new immigration plans. Migrant workers came to the UK under one set of circumstances, and now are being threatened with a new set of rules and regulations, many of which tick all the boxes in the definitions of modern slavery and forced labor. Now, it feels like the goalposts have been moved right in the middle of the game. This is no way to pay us back for all our efforts and our sacrifices. Instead of addressing the real causes of the NHS crisis, politicians, both far right and mainstream, choose to point fingers at us. Overseas workers are being targeted by a government that still desperately need their work to stop the NHS from killing over. Meanwhile, other countries out there are going out of their way to make workers from overseas feel more welcome. So government policies are not only excessively punitive, they are also short-sighted and bound to blow up in their face. It is no wonder that you find employers from other countries, Canada, Australia, USA, who can no longer go to the countries on the WHO red list, having the audacity to come and conduct job fairs in the major UK cities. But comrades, we see through the charade. It is smoke screen designed to distract us from the truth. Years of courts and political choices that have underfunded and undervalued the NHS. They seek to give us someone else to blame so that we do not hold them accountable. So we must reject this politics of division. We are not the enemy. We are your colleagues, we are your neighbors, and we are your friends. We are the ones who caring for your loved ones in the hospitals, driving your ambulances, and supporting your communities. The NHS was built on the principle that healthcare is a right, not a privilege. And that principle is under threat, not from migrants, but from policies that starve our health services of resources. If we want to save the NHS, we must reject this division. We must demand investment, fair pay, and respect for all workers, migrant and non-migrant. The NHS was built for everyone, and together we must fight to save it. We must stand against politicians' attempt to pit people against one another. The words of the poem first declaimed by Pastor Martin Lemola must continue to ring in our minds. In unison, we have committed to support our migrant workers through our Migrant Workers Network. We stand with them shoulder to shoulder to challenge the scapegoating of our colleagues. And on the 17th of December, Unison will once again be making a bold statement by mobilizing migrant workers and allies to Parliament to lobby MPs, asking them to stand against the scapegoating of migrant workers. We are demanding an end to exploitation by replacing employer-vendor visas with a sector-wide scheme, and we are demanding the retention of the 5-year qualifying period for ILR and an introduction of a fair pay agreement. We will continue to do our bit, and let me ask you all to do yours. Let us say it loud and clear. Migrants are not to blame. Migrants are the backbone of the NHS, and together we will fight for a health service that truly serves people. Migrants are not the problem. Migrants are the solution. Migrants are the NHS. Thank you.
Our next speaker, is Dr. Tony O'Sullivan, who is the co-chair of Keep Our NHS Public.
Thank you very much. When the NHS was created, it guaranteed comprehensive, accessible, free at the point of need care for all, and it was a beacon internationally standing for the human right to healthcare for everybody. Unfortunately, it no longer is in this situation. Who's to blame for that? But we know when the NHS is funded to succeed, it's one of the best health systems, if not the best health system in the world. But the NHS and social care now are in crisis after years of deliberate underfunding. And it's just outrageous that the past governments and this government choose to pour money into the private sector instead of building up our public services. And the consequences are dire. 250,000 unfilled vacancies in health and care. 7 million people are waiting for investigations or treatment. 16,000 people have died avoidable deaths in the last year because of delays in urgent care. People can't see a GP easily. They can't even find an NHS dentist. Maternal and infant deaths are just a scandal. And there are huge waits for mental health services, which are far too often being privatised. So no wonder people are really angry and looking for someone to blame. But it's government policy, especially over the last 15 years, that is totally responsible for this, not migrants in any way. So it's shame on politicians who offer up migrants as a scapegoat for their own failures. Britain's colonial past has given us access to a vast reserve army of labour. And it was the Minister of Health, Enoch Powell, who recruited thousands of nurses and midwives and support staff to work in the NHS. His racist Rivers of Blood speech came 5 years later in 1968, and it was echoed shamefully, as we've just heard, by Keir Starmer this year. Racism in the NHS towards both patients and black and brown NHS staff is far from new. But now people have become emboldened to come out with such racism and enabled to go further by our own political leaders. Workers from overseas helped found the NHS, and we've heard that. New migrant health and care workers make an unbelievable contribution to our NHS. 20% of NHS staff, a quarter of all nurses, a third of all doctors who now work for the NHS trained abroad. Over 60% of health workers dying in the pandemic were black or brown or from other minoritized communities. The NHS and social care would absolutely cease to function without migrants. The government has stopped clapping for them now. Instead, the government is choosing to cast all migrants as second-class people, not even citizens. Theresa May's hostile environment from 2015 erected even ever harsher barriers to migrants, as we've heard, barriers to migrants' safety and security, and adding incalculable suffering, hardship, and it's actually costing lives. Our country has a human rights obligation to treat migrants with dignity and respect. Excuse me. Instead of welcoming migrant workers and refugees and offering safety and security, migrant workers have to pay twice for NHS services, with annual health surcharges as well as their own taxes when they're working. Even NHS and care overseas workers had to pay twice until there was an outcry of disgust during COVID. And there's over 1 million people who are undocumented, not migrant workers, but undocumented people, including 200,000 children at least, who are excluded from free and safe healthcare, other than GP and emergency care. The government's plans for more severe restrictions on granting visas and indefinite leave to remain will have drastic consequences. And Sybil explained what's going on in Manchester, and she's so right there. And if their salary isn't increased by £63 in a whole year, £63, just over £1 a week, 300 people potentially face deportation and the destruction of their lives. So we absolutely must fight back. But let us remember that when MPs stood up against the PIP payments attacking disabled people back in June and July, they had a huge impact and a huge victory, not total, but a huge victory. The UVW workers organising migrant people at St George's and Epsom and St Helier Trust have just won a huge victory in, even though they're NHS workers, having been brought back from outsourced status, weren't being given NHS pay, and they've just won that. And the RCN and Unison and other unions have made very strong statements in support of migrant workers and of their own members. And local organising works in Lewisham and in East London. We had huge inroads into the disgraceful way of charging migrants for healthcare. We haven't won against the hostile environment, but we've made huge steps forward. So now we need urgent action right across the board, as Ed and others have said. We need MPs cooperating across parties to call out this racism and to stand against it. We need the unions working together to give a powerful no to government plans. And we need working together with other organisations at local and national level to have an alliance of unity against racism and against the destruction of our public services. So finishing off now, we thank migrants who have helped make the NHS, not We don't welcome them just because they work for the NHS. We welcome them because they're citizens in this country, equal to everybody else. But indeed, we do thank them, while those in power are, on the other hand, are dismantling our services. We need to restore our NHS in public hands, available to all again, free of private interests, and above all, free from racism.
We've just got 2 more speakers left. Thank you so much for staying around. Thank you to the over 100 people that are watching this online as well. So thank you to you. Do stick around after these last 2 speakers. We are going to have some time for comments and contributions from you all. And I have a few announcements about some things you can do and things you can take away. But before that, those 2 speakers don't need much introduction at all. First of all, Zarah Sultana MP.
Say it loud, say it clear. Say it loud, say it clear. On that note, can I thank Obi, Sybil, can I thank Adekunle and Andrew for being the people that are keeping this country running. Our NHS would not function without migrants, and we are a country that is richer for their presence, so thank you. I also want to thank all of you for taking time out of your evening to join us, and those who are watching this virtually, for standing up, speaking out and caring about one of our greatest collective achievements, the NHS. A system built on need, not greed, a system that is compassionate, universal and free at the point of use. A system that shows us that a better world is not only possible, it is truly achievable. And now the founding principles of the NHS that we hold so dearly aren't just principles that belong in a GP surgery or hospitals or clinics. They are principles that should guide society as a whole, because we know it is possible to provide for everyone in our country without discrimination. It is possible to build a society which meets people's needs, not corporate profits. And after the Second World War, it was the working class in all of its diversity that built the NHS, especially the Windrush generation. It was trade unions and community organisers that fought for healthcare as a basic right. And we know that every right, every gain, every bit of social progress, it was never handed to us by politicians. It was fought for by our trade unions and by our communities. And so we inherit a rich legacy. And with that comes a responsibility, not just to defend it, but to demand more, not less. In the 6th richest country on earth, all of us should have access to affordable housing. All of us should have access to clean water, electricity, nutritious food, reliable, fast and free public transport, and even the internet. There is no justification for anyone who lives in this country to not have the essentials of a decent life. That's what we all should be fighting for. And yet, we have a Labour government elected on a mandate for change. And what has that government done with this power that they've inherited as a mandate from the country? Some people might say nothing. In fact, it's worse than nothing. They are actively damaging the country. This is a government that has retained the 2-child benefit cap, attacked pensioners and scrapped winter fuel payments, attacked disabled people and cut their benefits, and has enabled genocide in Gaza. And I'm very proud to have voted against every single one of those because it was the right thing to do. And we see Wes Streeting in this Labour government as Health Secretary, opening the door to NHS privatisation, and it is deeply shameful to see this Labour Party become a party of billionaire donors and corporate lobbyists, a party that was actually born from the Labour movement and looks so different now, a party that has taken, well, Wes Street in particular, has taken hundreds of thousands of pounds from individuals and organisations with vested interests in private healthcare. And we know that no one gives donations out of the goodness out of their heart. They are expecting a return on that investment. So under Streeting's leadership of the NHS, it is leaning more heavily on private providers, and he calls it pragmatic. We know that this is theft. We know that this is a slippery slope that ends in the dismantling of our NHS, and we have resident doctors on strike right now, and we all in this room send our solidarity to them. as they take industrial action. Because they are not just fighting for better terms and conditions and the erosion of their pay, they are fighting for an NHS fit for the future that is able to serve our communities. And shame again on West Streeting for blaming them for the problems that have been created by a decade of underfunding and political cowardice. He is not fit to tie their shoelaces. Yes, NHS hospitals and buildings matter and equipment matters, of course it does. But more than anything, the NHS is its people. Hardworking nurses, doctors, porters, cleaners, paramedics, physiotherapists, lab technicians, radiographers, administrators, every single one of them playing a vital role. Yet it is migrant NHS workers on the front lines of this who are hit by the hostile environment, who are having to pay fees, visa fees, extortionate visa fees, and burdened by health surcharges. You have NHS workers providing healthcare having to pay to access healthcare themselves. And now they are faced with deportation because this government has decided to change rules without a vote in Parliament, just as secondary legislation, and pull the rug from people's feet is disgraceful. So the racism NHS workers face, unfortunately, isn't just from patients, it's also from Westminster. And only a few months ago, staff at St Thomas's Hospital were forced to lock down parts of the hospital during the Tommy Robinson demonstration. I was really proud to speak at that demonstration because it is important that we challenge fascism. It is not enough to just ignore it, because you don't defeat fascism by ignoring it, you don't defeat fascism by copying it, like the Labour Party, you defeat fascism by fighting back. And when the fascists show up, we show up. And like I said, healthcare workers, many from racialised or migrant backgrounds, reporting through their unions, feeling unsafe from racism in their own workplace. Imagine that. Imagine dedicating your life to saving others, only to fear racial harassment and violence in your workplace. And this is a government that refuses not only to take responsibility, but it refuses to defend NHS workers from racism and intimidation that it is directly stoking itself. This is a government led by a Prime Minister who echoed Enoch Powell using Island of Strangers and said, migration has caused incalculable damage to our country. Shame on him and every Labour politician that went out and defended him. They scapegoat the very people who hold our communities together. And let's be clear, our NHS would collapse today without migrant workers. 1 in 5 NHS staff come from overseas. Many work far from their families. Many take on the toughest shifts. Many fill the gaps caused by chronic underfunding. And this government, how does it repay them? By attacking migrants, by doubling down on the same cruel rhetoric that we might expect from the Conservatives and we definitely expect from Reform, by pushing proposals, including those put forward by Sybil Msezane, that make life very harder for the very people who keep our hospitals running. And in Parliament, I asked Sybil Msezane if she felt proud that her proposals to take the belongings of refugees, to deport entire families, including children who have made their lives here, to keep refugees waiting 20 years before they can apply for permanent settlement, if she felt proud of those policies that have been endorsed by fascist Tommy Robinson. These are policies straight out of the fascist playbook, and it doesn't come as a surprise she wasn't able to answer my question and said it was beneath contempt. This is a Labour government beneath contempt. This is a Labour government that attacks migrants when the problems are underfunding, understaffing, and the creeping privatisation of the NHS. So shame on West Streeting, shame on Sybil Msezane, and shame on Keir Starmer. We know that the real enemy of the working class travels by private jet, not migrant dinghy. And we also know in this room the words of Nye Bevan, who said, the NHS will last as long as there are folk left with the faith to fight for it. We are those folk, we have that faith, and we will fight for the NHS the same way we fight for our migrant communities, with complete, utter solidarity. Immigrants are not your scapegoats, and the NHS is definitely not for sale. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Zarah. Our final speaker, so we can get you on camera. Here we have, oh, we the wrong one. I have to use this one, so we are on the camera there as well. Zack Polanski.
Thank you very much, and thank you for being here. So a couple of nights ago, I had a debate on Radio 4 with Jeremy Hunt about who pays tax and who should pay tax. It's fair to say we didn't agree on a whole lot. And as I was looking him in his eyes, I was just feeling the audacity of this man who was part of destroying our National Health Service, part of years of austerity and the destruction of this country, to carry on a platform on national radio as if he was the answer to our economy, as if trickle-down economics ever worked for anyone. And I had a flashback to another debate I had about 2 years ago before the general election with Wes Streeting, when he was Shadow Health Secretary. And I talked about many of the things we've talked about tonight, the need to keep our NHS public, the need to recognise migrants' contributions, and the need to make sure we didn't accept privatisation through the back door. And Wes Streeting's response, live to me, was to put his hand up pretty much in my face, or in the direction of my face, and say the left is bleating on again. And that was an indication of exactly how this Labour government would behave and how they would treat us and our public services. And it's in exactly the same way as Conservative austerity. It is no better just because we've changed the colour of the rosette. And Jeremy Hunt and Wes Streeting say there is no money left. And we know that Rachel Reeves on Wednesday will probably stand up at that dispatch box with a sad face as she creates more and more cuts. And we'll talk about tough choices. But why are they always tough choices for working class communities, for migrants, for disabled people? When are we going to see tough choices for multimillionaires and billionaires? It is time to tax the rich. Earlier this year, I was at St Hilliers Hospital with the migrant workers we were just hearing about from UVW, United Voices of the World. If you don't know this union, they're a migrant workers union who are involved in lots of disputes. I first got involved with them during the pandemic because they were a group of migrant care workers who weren't even being paid a living wage. Now, this was during the pandemic when so many of us were locked away, safe in our homes and being looked after if necessary. Yet these people who had flown from all over the world, had come and made their home here, were working away to keep people who were born in this country safe. And then when they complained about their working conditions and their wages, they were rewarded by the CEO with pizza. And as one of the workers said to me, it was cold pizza, just to add insult to injury. So I turned up with ITV and Channel 4, we stood on the picket line, we stood with lots of campaigners. That group of workers are now amongst the highest paid care workers in London, organising works, unions work. And the same thing in St Hilliers. I turned up with them a few months ago. Initially, the NHS exec meeting would not meet with them. Politician turns up, we're suddenly in the room with the board meeting. They're not listening to the migrant workers, they will listen to the politician. And now, while I'm pleased that they managed to get that negotiation, how disgusting is that? The relationship with power. That they wouldn't talk to the caterers, the cleaners, the porters, the very people keeping our NHS services running, but they would talk to the people that they see as powerful. And I think that speaks to the entire relationship here of power and wealth that donates to our Labour politicians and our Conservative politicians. We know the Labour government took £4.1 million from Quadrature Capital before the general election. This is an asset management fund with hedge funds based in oil and gas companies, arms trade companies, gambling companies, and of course, private healthcare companies. So we shouldn't be surprised when we see them make the decisions they make. They're doing literally what they've been paid to do. The vested interests that are in their pocket. Now, of all the brilliant things that struck me tonight, Sybil said something where I thought, that's it right there. She said, we're not just fighting to save the NHS. And I agree. We're fighting to save ourselves. Because I think all of this, everything that's happening in our country right now, is a question mark about who we are. Who are we as a nation? Because we as a nation are not flags or symbols, and we are certainly not symbols that are designed to make people of colour or migrants feel intimidated or feel like they don't belong in our communities. Patriotism is the NHS. As has been said many times tonight, a response to a world war to build our country back. of resilience to say, actually, everyone should be cared for. No one should be left behind. And so our symbol as a National Health Service is to look after people, to care for people. Those very values of compassion and care are rooted, or should be rooted, throughout the entire structure. And far too often we hear in the story of migration that we should accept migrants because of food or culture, art or music. And these are no doubt brilliant things. But as has been said, these are not the reasons to humanize migrants. Looking people in the eyes and recognizing people are human beings for nothing else other than basic humanity and dignity. And yes, we do need migrants for our National Health Service. Yes, we have huge vacancies. But the economic argument here is not really the point. The point here is that the whole conversation about migration often obsesses over the small boats. Small boats are 5% of migration. Do you feel like on the media, the small boats are 5% of the media coverage? It's completely the other way around. And to finish off, this all links in. Because I was talking to Jeremy Hunt, and it just strikes me every single time that the whole economic model that is designed to be extractive and exploitative is what is also often destroying our compassion. It's the same system destroying our rivers, destroying our mines, and destroying our National Health Service. But we don't need to despair. We just need to get organised. And organisations like this one, alongside the unions, alongside the workers, and alongside progressive politicians who will stand up for people and planet and not vested interests, means we will win this fight. But we must never stop fighting. We must keep our NHS public. Thank you.